I really came up from not having. Looked at people who were wealthy like they were just like this strange other, like aliens.
We can consciously desire wealth. We can consciously be women of business, hustling, grinding, and yet we're stuck in this hamster wheel of self-sabotage to reaffirm our belief, which can be a subconscious belief, easy, hard.
But I think the average person gets told this story of you have to go to college and then they're living somebody else's life.
I've never even thought about it that way before, and instantly I saw my papa. And I was like, that little fucker. You passed that on to me. Yeah, you were the mechanic who worked every day for 14 hours and somebody offered you a job to buy the mechanic shop, to be the best mechanic in all of the area, and you said no because you wanted to stay working hard for your money.
The capacity for joy and happiness in the most impoverished places, I think we're doing it wrong. I think we're doing it all wrong. Like, we have equated money to buying happiness, and it doesn't.
Right? So like there's this masculine hustle, grind, and then there's this feminine that thinks that she can just sit back with her feet up and manifest and it's all going to poof be in her bank account, which is so not what you mean when you talk about building wealth in the feminine. What do you actually mean when you talk about building wealth in the feminine energy? What is going on, Savages? And welcome back to another episode on the Business Savage podcast. I'm your host, Cassandra Britton, and I'm so excited for today's conversation. We have another badass female entrepreneur with us this morning, Michelle Dillard. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for
being
here.
Such an honor to be here. Oh my gosh.
We've been talking about this for a hot minute since I met you, which was like a month ago, 6 weeks ago.
Yep.
And in that time, I feel like we have been in each other's DMs and phones, text messages a lot, sharing a lot of events and resources.
Fast friends for sure.
Yeah. Sometimes when it clicks, it clicks.
It does. I think when you meet people who really match your vibration, you get so much energy being around them, and you're just like attracted to those types of people. So that's definitely what I see in you.
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate that. You too. We were just sharing that before. So friends, let me read you Michelle's bio so that we can really do this justice. Michelle is a respected abundance and money mindset coach who helps thousands of entrepreneurs through the group that she co-founded with her husband, Mike Dillard. It is called Richer Every Day. Hello. Together, they help entrepreneurs invest like the rich in times of uncertainty. As a self-made millionaire investor herself, hello. She's passionate about teaching women how to gain control and confidence with their finances, change their family lineage, and heal money wounds in order to create generational wealth in the feminine energy. Michelle is an international speaker, sharing her insights and experiences to inspire and educate audiences around the globe on financial empowerment and personal growth. Hello. Welcome to the show, Michelle. Welcome to the show. All right, let's kick this off. Today, if you haven't figured out yet, we're going to talk about money. So for those of you that are listening to this and you just went like this, if you're watching on YouTube, you watch me just contract. If you're driving and you can't see that, I just contracted. Okay. For those of you that are already a little bit like, ooh, they're going to talk about money, Michelle's going to dive deeper into where that could come from or why that might be. But we're going to talk about building wealth in the feminine energy.
Yep.
As two women who are successful business women, proud to say that, proud to sit in a chair next to you and say that, proud to be on a panel with you in a couple of weeks talking about that too.
Yes,
just super exciting. Bunch of other female business owners. That'll be amazing. So many people traditionally think that more money equals more work. That was my story for a really long time, which we can dive into as well. And so today, Michelle is going to share her experience, her expertise, her wisdom, helping you become richer every single day, and not in the grind more, do more, but in a smarter, more aligned, more feminine way. So let's start off with your story, because you weren't always a money mindset coach. Nope. I know you were in design. I know she's helping me design my condo right now, all of the things. So I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself, and then we can dive into the juicy stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Again, such an honor to be here. I'm super excited to dive in with you and to this is my favorite subject. I can talk about money and mindset all day long. My story, I really came up from not having. Like, I didn't have money as a kid, and I looked at people who were wealthy like they were just like this strange other like aliens. I knew I didn't understand, and I knew I needed to, and I wanted to understand. Like, why am I on this side of the fence and they're on this side of the fence type of thing.
Curiosity.
Yep. And hard knocks. Like, I had to figure it out. I didn't have parents who could teach me, and I just learned. I was self-taught. Moved out at 15 and just started figuring it all out.
You moved out at 15 years old?
I did, yeah.
Pull your mic a little closer. Everyone's got to hear that voice a little bit more. There we go. There we go. Okay, so moved out at 15, figured it all out.
Yeah,
Okay.
just figured out the loopholes to find places to rent and whatnot. And that's actually one of the skills that I carry today that I'm actually really, really proud of, because that skill that was built from that place is like, like one of my favorite things to do is like finding a new tax loophole that can save me like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so like, that's one of the skills that was built and forged in that time of really not having that I love and teach today.
Amazing. Cool. Okay. So what did you originally go to school for?
I actually didn't. I was starting.
I love this. I love this.
I'm telling you, School of Hard Knocks. Yeah. I started interning. I graduated earlier. I started interning at an advertising agency, and I had the choice. And I was like, okay, I just don't understand. Everybody's wanting me to go to college, but I'm going to go pay all this money to go get a degree to then hopefully have a job at the place that I'm interning at. And so I was just like, it just didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand why everybody does this path. Again, I didn't really have parents who told me to go down that path, so I was kind of lucky in that way. But I think the average person gets told this story of you have to go to college and do the things and get the certifications and do all the stuff, and then they're living somebody else's life. So luckily, I did not necessarily have that conditioning because I was just kind of figuring it out on my own. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stay with this advertising agency. And I climbed up the corporate ladder. I thought I had made, like I made it. I made corporate America, like I'm free. So I thought. And, but yeah, I mean, I found my own path to success within that company that I had a foot in high school.
Great. I love this because we talk about this on the show, and so many people think the should, right? I should go to college. I should go to university. So if you're listening to this right now, there you go.
Yeah.
Self-made millionaire.
Yeah.
Okay. Next chapter. I know there's design in there.
Yeah. And before design, this is kind of interesting so the corporate career made it, made quote unquote it the place that everybody thinks that happiness comes from, wealth. And I was so unhappy. I can
double click.
Yeah. I was totally unhappy, and I went into a totally different direction. Started working in nonprofits, and that was really, really fulfilling to me. And so I found myself, going from a corporate career to working in Honduras in doing micro enterprise, and I could see the capacity for joy in the artisans and the crafts that they would make and the products that they would make. So that's actually what got me into interior design, was finding ways to then be the bridge of people who were impoverished who had handicrafts that I could then sell. And so I would sell luxury rugs, like alpaca rugs and whatnot, in interior design stores. So that's kind of my path and journey. But I really saw this need and this service. I knew a lot of wealthy people, and style is just something that's fun for me. So I found the way to bridge the two.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay. And then next chapter, getting more into the money mindset coaching.
Well, it was really, really fascinating to me to be living in that purpose, to be so fulfilled in what I was doing and really helping people. And then bridging to these, extremely wealthy families. And I could see how they would work with money, how they would be so stressed out, but they had to buy all the things. And the second that they were done with that room, they were moving on to the next thing. And I just saw the capacity for joy and happiness in the most impoverished places, and the capacity for stress and chaos in these high-end luxury homes. And I'm like, I think we're doing it wrong. I think we're doing it all wrong. Like, we have equated money to buying happiness, and it doesn't. And it's been my life's work to really uncouple these two. And yes, I will say that you have to be out of a survival state. When you are in a survival state, then, you're not really able to access all of your creativity. So, step one is find a way to create some stability in your life, to get your body into safety. But then from there on, it's really our work is to find the abundance in other ways than just chasing solely money, thinking that that's going to provide us everything that we want in life, because it doesn't.
Yeah. And I can definitely attest to that. And like, I'm sure we'll probably get into a little bit of my story. But like, I talk about that on the show all the time about constantly chasing the next best thing, thinking that happiness is going to be in that place.
Yep.
And then you get to it or you achieve it or you have it, whatever it is, like especially physical items.
Yep.
And then you buy them, have them, stand in them, and you're like, oh, what the fuck? Like this doesn't feel at all like I thought it was going to feel like, right? And then, because so there's so much deeper than that, which I know is the work that you do. I would really love to take this back and like maybe we start right at the beginning of like how you actually do all of this. And I know this is like the starting point of your work. Some of the stuff that I talk about too is like your money beliefs and your money story, which starts, to my understanding, from the age of 6. By the time you reach 6 years old, you have formed your conditioning around your idea of money. So your story is different than my story based on our beliefs and based on our upbringings. Right. And so we can consciously desire wealth. We can consciously be women of business, hustling, grinding, building funnels, building marketing, doing all of these things, showing up, hiring the coaches, doing all the things that they tell us to do. And yet we're stuck in this hamster wheel of self-sabotage to reaffirm our belief, which can be a subconscious belief of what we believe money to be: easy, hard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so maybe I'll let you start and then I can jump into like what comes up for you as I start talking about money beliefs and a money story from a young age and how that is a part of what you break down and change in someone to allow them to attract wealth into their life.
Yeah. And what's really fascinating is that it actually goes beyond that too, and beyond just our lives, but actually inheriting some of our parents' stuff. I love that you just through our DNA epigenetically. Like there was a study done at Emory University where they studied these mice and they trained the male mice to fear the scent of cherry blossoms. So they would introduce the scent and then give the mice a mild electric shock. So basically trauma training these mice to fear the scent of cherry blossoms. Now they bred these mice, and 5 generations later, those baby mice were also afraid of the cherry blossoms. And I think about this a lot, and I think about everybody's fear. Maybe it's a fear of doing a live, right? A fear of putting a reel out there, a fear of making an offer, all of these fears or like hurdles to jump over. And I just keep thinking like, you're the baby mice that gets to know that it's not something to fear anymore. Because maybe it's just in your body and programmed in your body, and you have to train yourself through action. You have to put yourself out there, embrace the fear to retrain the neural pathways that it's not something to fear.
I love that you just said that. As you know, my biggest work is turning fears to freedom. I love that you just said that. Yeah, because sometimes people will say, I don't know where this comes from. That's the question I always start with, right? Why are you scared of that? I don't really know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really know. And so maybe sometimes it's passed along. Continue.
Yep. Yeah. And you know, if you were to ask them, well, if you did know, if you did know, where do you think it might have, creating an opening? And what I've found is 9 times out of 10, if people really relax their brain and quit trying to find the quote unquote right answer, an answer will appear. And that's really coming from the subconscious. And it may come in like an image or a feeling, depending on if you're, see things in your head or if you're more of a feeler. But usually something will come up, and it's typically is within that, up to 6, sometimes 7 range, where there have been beliefs that they're first learning about money. Like if you think about it, when we're born, we have no concept. We have no idea what money is. And we have no idea how, in our relation to the other, right? So how are we? How are they? What's going on in this reality, And then we make these meanings. There's usually a situation, and then we make a meaning about that situation. And then just like that, the belief system is rooted. And then what we end up doing, because our brains are so designed for efficiency and for our survival, is that we'll see something and then we'll go, oh, yep, see, that's more evidence. Money is hard and we can't have the things that we want type of a thing.
Reticular activator system is going.
Yep. Yeah. And then it's confirmation bias too. It's like we seek and we find and we prove. I believe we're always proving our beliefs to be true. So it's really conscious work to retrain that whole system that you've built a lifetime of evidence to believe.
Great. Wow. I want to segue really quick and then come back to this, because when I met you, so for those of you curious, I met Michelle. She was speaking at a retreat. And my deepest rooted belief system, which I've had to work so hard and still working on, and you're still helping me with, is money is hard. Like I've had to reprogram that. And so you did an exercise where you had us like feel into our bodies, right? Because everything is so ingrained deep within us. And it was like, what is your, I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember exactly what you did. This was my interpretation of it, was like, you know, what is your relationship with money? And everyone made like a reaction or a feeling. I think I kind of like hit or whatever it was. Okay. And then what would it feel like if it was expansive? And you had us kind of open up. And then you had us say something to the effect of like, where did that come from, or who passed that on to you? And I've never, ever even thought about it that way before. And instantly I saw my papa, like instantly. And I was like, that little fucker. You passed that on to me. Yeah, you were the mechanic who worked every day for 14 hours, and somebody offered you a job to buy the mechanic shop, to be the best mechanic in all of the area, and you said no because you wanted to stay working hard for your money, yada, 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 yada. And then all of a sudden it was like, brrr, and I was like, huh. It came from you. Segue back. So where does somebody begin to identify maybe some questions that they can start to ask themselves around this?
Yeah. I think the body tells us so much. And so the exercise that I love doing the most is really creating a baseline. So you're going to want to create a baseline and tap into your body and pull up, your most favorite memories, and just notice what's going on in your body and how does it feel to feel, say, loved or confident or safe or whatever it, like try a few different things so that you have a baseline of what good feels to you. And then ask your body to communicate to you, what does, struggle feel like, or what does, so that, again, you're creating a baseline. And then pull up your relationship with money. Just ask your body and feel into your body. It's really good to like start moving, swaying, and really drop your consciousness down into your heart instead of, we're so in our minds. And even more than that, we're either in the future or we're in the past. And so it's very rare that we are actually inhabiting our body. And I think that that's actually where our feminine wisdom lies. And so when we can get into our body and then ask, how do we truly feel about money? Allow it to move the way it's going to move, and what messages does it have for it? If sometimes you'll have a sensation, sometimes if there's a pain in your body, you can actually go into that pain and you can ask it questions. You can ask like, what is this coming from? Sometimes it'll be like feeling on the shoulder, like the weight of the world, and you just start having this conversation with your body and it will tell you.
Yeah.
But we've got to be quiet enough to listen.
Yeah. And I love that you're talking about this. And like, I would just want to bring this back to the awareness of the listener that's listening right now, who's like, doesn't really understand what you're talking about, because I do think it's at a certain level in a personal development journey to have that ability, right? Like I'm going to toot our own horns right now. Like we have the ability to close our eyes, ask ourselves that question. And it's like, write this, right? Sure. Because we're very curious. We're very good at doing that. We've been doing it for a while and kind of like know this level of work. So for the person who maybe hasn't, and they're listening to this, maybe like
here's what I would say is money is, what do you want to fill that blank with?
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
Like what do you instantly think of? What's the imagery that flashes in your head? And this is what you can do anytime you're going to take an action that involves money as well. Like, okay, speaking is, putting myself out in public is, and then just what's the very, very first thing that flashes in your mind? They say that most of the time when kids taking a test, they get the answer right first and then they second guess it. Well, that's the subconscious that always knows. And then the conscious mind comes in and tries to make sense of it. You do not need to make sense of what is coming up. Most of the time it won't make sense. And that's actually perfect. It's not supposed to, because some of the things aren't related. Like for instance, I had a client who she made a decision that like being a boss lady or being an entrepreneur was like not that great. So she kind of hid her stuff. And it turns out it was from when she was in 5th grade. She was playing a game and like collecting all of her friends' erasers. And she was like the queen of the erasers. And like people had to ask her to get the erasers.
That's so funny.
And so an eraser popped up for her. And that's when she decided that it wasn't okay to lead and manage resources. And so that's what came up for her. But if it's like pulling on a string, you just one thing comes up and then you just ask the next question. Okay, well, where was that?
Right.
Where did that come from?
Yeah.
What memory might that have come from? The hardest thing to do is trust what comes up. But the more that you can trust what comes up in that first flash second when you think money is
blank,
how do you want to fill in the blank?
Right. Beautiful.
And then go from there.
Great place to start. And maybe this is right, maybe this is wrong. Like a second piece to that of what I would do is, because, you know, where our attention goes, energy flows. And so if a lot of that is money is scary, money is evil, money is blank, and there's a lot of that associated with it, then it's consciously what is the opposite of that, and then like reaffirming those statements, even if we don't necessarily believe them. It's like one of the exercises that we have women do in our retreats is like all of the scarce terms, and then, you know, what are all these things that we're actually saying to ourselves all the time that are reaffirming all of this scarcity and reaffirming these beliefs, and what would it look like, as hard as it might be, to change those statements? I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, well, it switches the reticular activation, which is our mind's superpower to find things that we already believe, right? And I think that, you know, our brains are like these amazing search engines, much like a Google search engine. Like literally whatever we type in, we're going to find.
Yeah.
So I think it's about asking the right questions. It's about, okay, maybe also acknowledging the beliefs that are there without judgment.
Right.
That's a tough thing for a lot of people. It's like, oh, I have this thing, and it's like, oh, but like they're like resisting that belief system. And I think that instead of resisting and shaming and guilting and trying to like split that part of you off, it's more so about pulling that part in and going, oh, you're scared. Like, oh,
yeah,
maybe it's hard. Maybe it doesn't have to be hard.
Yeah.
Could it be easy? I know it could be easy for other people. Could it potentially be easy for me? What would that look like? Sometimes when we go from wanting to believe something that our body isn't actually fully feeling is true, what we can do is we can create a little bit of dissonance. And so there's the thing that we're wanting to believe, but our body's not fully on board with that. And so we've got to look for these like stair steps in between, right? Like creating an opening and using opening language, which is like, I'm learning that money isn't always hard. I'm learning that money could be easy.
Yep.
And then sit with that belief system. Like I like to write it on my mirror. So I see it every day. I'll have it on my phone, like things that I'll use environment design to help me clue into the belief systems that I'm wanting to really embed into the subconscious.
So you're talking about that in your office.
Yeah. And so that is just a super powerful tool to be working on acclimating a belief system to something towards what you want instead of what the current state that it is.
Yeah. I love that you're getting so deep into this energy work, because like that's the core belief of all of this. And I know, you know, you do a lot of the like savings and like how to actually make money and that kind of stuff too. But it's like so deeply ingrained, which is, and not a lot of people know or talk about this level, which is why I value you so much and I love what you're sharing. I would love to talk a little bit about, so I'm using this as my example, but also because I know it's so many people's example and probably most women, and we're talking about building wealth in the feminine.
Yes.
So let me segue just a small story. Most of my listeners have heard this. I'm not sure if you have. So growing up, I basically heard all the time, like, we don't have enough, we can't afford that, you know, constantly was reaffirmed those types of stories. My father was an entrepreneur. He did very well. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, raised the 3 kids. She had to ask for money, right? It was the family money, but she asked my father for it. And I remember a time when she literally asked for a new pair of shoes because there was holes in her shoes, and she was told no because he thought they were fine. And I remember from such a young age seeing that and thinking to myself, holy Hannah Montana, I don't ever want that. And so here I was, you know, a young girl wanting new hockey skates and wanting all of these things. And my dad was teaching me hard work. Go earn them, go earn them, go earn them. He gave me an edger as a 7-year-old to go around my neighbors, edging their lawns, destroying their lawns, because I had no idea what I was doing, asking them for $5 so that I could buy new hockey skates. And he was teaching me hard work equals money. You do all of this work, you sweat physically, you're going to get your money. So no surprise that I grew up being like, I don't need a man. I'm going to do this myself. Oh my goodness, what a journey, right? The masculine wall comes up, and literally learning, and this is where I'm going with this, time. I physically do something. I spend an hour. I give you an hourly rate, whatever it is, I get money. And I know that so much of what you do is just like take this, squish it up, throw it in the garbage. That is such a masculine construct to building wealth. And you do this in such a beautiful, different way. And so I would just love to open that up for you to whatever you take from that. And
yeah, you know, I look around and I see so many entrepreneurs just absolutely killing themselves. And like, just it takes so much energy as an entrepreneur and so much investment, money investment too. And I think that there is a societal drive to show resources. And this is actually a biological driver too, because as pack animals, we have to show our resources. Like this is very much in our evolution, right? It's how we find mating partners. And if you think about humans are really just glorified animals. And here we are, pack animals, and we're trying to show resources. But the thing that we can get caught up in is believing that we always need these things to show. And our biology says that it has to be the things that you can see and show off to others. But really, it's the intangibles that are the real resources. It's the money in your bank. I can't tell you how many multi-million-dollar broke people, like these people are paycheck to paycheck, even though they live in multi-million-dollar houses. Like if you don't have the reserves, if you are technically spending what you're making, then you're not wealthy. And that's something that it's really coming from a place of passion, because I see people ebb and flow, you know, like ourselves included. Mike was not always able to create the money that he was able to create. He had a brain injury for like a few years. And so it can go in a second.
Yeah.
And things can change, and you have to be safeguarding for the future. And so it's really about unsubscribing from that game of constantly having to show your resources and constantly having to be in this never-ending chase of like the bigger house, the bigger car, the bigger this, because it actually doesn't provide happiness. And for me, when I redefined what success looks like for me, that helped, and it's along with redefining my identity in the world. It's like I looked at myself like I was broke because that's where I came from. But the second I started calling myself an investor, everything started changing. And so I worked on my identity first, and then I worked on my relationship with money and management of it, and unsubscribing from the natural, almost biological drivers of like, no, I want to get the nice thing. I want to get the, like the bigger house and the bigger car, and it like it continues. But the real races are actually what you're putting aside and what you're growing. And those things can sometimes be unsexy because you don't see it.
There's so much here. So much here to dive into. So let's talk a little bit about when you hear women sometimes talking about building wealth in the feminine, you talked about this morning.
Yeah.
And I think this is funny to bring in. And so we see the women that are like, more money, and like, I'm just going to pray to the money gods, and I just want to manifest, and all of a sudden, poof, I'm going to have $1 million in my bank account, right? So like there's this masculine hustle, grind, and then there's this feminine that thinks that she can just sit back with her feet up and manifest, and it's all going to poof be in her bank account, which is so not what you mean when you talk about building wealth in the feminine. What do you actually mean when you talk about building wealth in the feminine energy?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I love that, because there is this misconception of like, oh, it's feminine, and I'm just gonna think it, and I'm just gonna be in the receive mode, and it's all gonna come to me. And I believe a lot of that. Yes, a lot of that is true, but I also think there's this generalization and misunderstanding of how powerful the feminine is. It's not just in receptivity, but if you think about human evolution, and you think about the masculine energy and how it's been shaped and how it's evolved through evolution. The men were the hunters, right? They were the focused on one thing, and they went out. They couldn't really talk to their fellow guys, because if somebody talked, then that would scare away the animals. You know what I mean? So their evolution in community, like we have the advantage because we women were running the damn thing. We were in community. We were dealing with complex systems. We were cooking massive meals for the tribe and taking care of our young at the same time. Like our capacity is so different. And although men have the amazing, singular focused, foveal focused, singular, go hunt and kill, and And that's what we've seen
Right.
in business,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
The masculine focus, go hunt, kill the thing. And I think as women, as more women are in the business, like in business and rising to wealth, we've kind of followed that footprint a little bit of just doing it the masculine way. And I think that we have our own special way of creating wealth. And instead of this hunter approach, it's really a gatherer approach. It's a really of like bringing community together and like loving on people and nurturing ourselves and others, bringing solutions to real problems. Like there's a real feminine way of doing business that can flourish. That's not going to lead to as much burnout as if we're in that overdrive hunter, singular focus way.
It makes so much sense. So much sense. I love the analogy that you just gave. Like that even gave me a lot of perspective. I love that. And I think, and maybe this is relevant, maybe it's not, but like a piece that I see as a business coach is the yes to everything in business. And so I feel like that really relates to what you're talking about. And something I'm really learning, like my recent reel even, is like the CEO mindset versus the entrepreneur, or working on versus working in, right? Which is what I meant by that. I think it's like the woman who is like, well, yes, I'm going to say yes, and I have to take on that service, and I probably should do this, and I also should do this. And then you wear yourself so thin versus what happens if this is the season I'm in right now. I'm like, no, thank you to that $12,000 client. And I'm going to let you go because you're not giving me a lot of energy, but you feel great. So I'm going to double down on you, even though you're not paying all of my bills. They were, but I'm going to say no to them because I know if I say full yes to you, that opens me up to my feminine creativity where I flourish.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
And then you start operating in a more of a magnetism way.
Yeah.
Where your radiance, your energy is just magnetic.
Yeah.
And that actually pulls in more, because that is like the frequency of abundance. When you're really living in that place of joy and fulfillment and you meet somebody who matches your energy, and then that energy collides and it creates more energy, and you're like, yeah. It's almost like you're tapping into this well of like never ending joy and purpose, and it starts fulfilling itself. Right. And then you start finding more resources like that, because like attracts like, so they'll pull in more. But we've got to say the no's.
Right.
We've got to say no to what doesn't serve us. Allowing that to allowing the belief system that we have to do something for money, because it's really about what purpose. Like, is that going to really drive the purpose? And yes, if you are in a survival state, there are things that you have to do to get yourself out of that survival state.
Right.
And so maybe saying yes to things temporarily until you can create, find more of the right fit clients. But when you reach a certain level, you've got to switch your fuel. And I think of the entrepreneur who is the yes person in the beginning because they had to be, right? And we had to figure out how to do all the positions. We had to figure out how to be our own accountant and our own this and our own that. Like we've got to know it all. But then we have to switch because what got us here is not going to get us there.
Yep.
And this is what that means is like you've got to start taking those hats off one by one by one. And all of the, yes, I'll do that, I'll figure it out, has to be, I'll figure who can do that.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it has to be less of you and more of other people. And then you start evolving into the leadership role.
Yeah.
And then that becomes your primary, is like learning how to lead a team and inspire people and bringing more mastery to your product and services.
I would love your take on this. You heard me ask Cody this, and so I would love your take on it because I feel like you probably have a really valuable piece of insight. Everyone who's listened to my show knows my story, owning my beauty salon back in Toronto. And I know there's so many people that I speak to, and even like responses on that reel that are like, well, I am the talent, or like, how do I become working on and hire the other people to come in and do the things that I'm the only one who can do, which is such bullshit. Is a limiting belief that they believe, that I believed, that I was the only one who could do all of the things, right? And we think we have this fear around, she's not going to do it as well as I am, or she won't care as much as I will. She probably won't fucking care as much as you ever will because it's not her business. It's your business. So like, what do you have to say to that woman right now who's like, but I am the physical service, or I am the talent, or I am the coach showing up on the call, or I am the designer. How do they take that first step towards doing this? And then bringing other people, systems, automations, whatever it is, into like, what do they need to believe to do that?
I think it's about finding something that's bigger than you. And so when you are the product, then you've got to repackage and rebrand yourself into what you stand for, right? Like maybe you're making a movement for women to be more independent and you're creating a spot for somebody else to fill, right? And then you sell them on that idea of like, this is a business in a box. You can walk into it and here's what I'm standing for.
Right.
This is about a woman in her fullest expression who's an artist, who's a badass. Like you sell that mission and find the right person who can fulfill it with knowing that nobody's going to do it your way. You know, and we need to leave space for that. We need to leave space for other people to do it their way. And we need to get out of the way unless we want to be in that position
Say
forever.
that again. Say that again.
So we need to get out of the way.
Yeah.
If somebody is going to create a way for you to get out
Wow.
too.
Yeah.
You got to create the space for them.
Yeah. I know that just landed. That landed for me. I know that just landed for a lot of people listening to this that think like, I wear all the hats in the business. How do I physically start to work on it and think bigger picture?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's like you've got to let your ego side.
Yeah. I want to double tap on what you started out with talking about there. I talk about this all the time. I think all business coaches and entrepreneurs do. Community and the people that you surround yourself with. We've all heard this a million times and I've said it a million times, but like you are the product of the 5 people that you spend the most amount of time with.
Yep.
If you take a look, now we've got those little bubbles that we can pin on our phones. You take a look at who's pinned on your phone. Like this is a really great place for y'all to start is like who's pinned there and why? Yeah. Like, is mom and dad pinned there because you should be calling them every day? And so you remind yourself by having them pinned there that I should call you every day. Yeah. That's beautiful. Keep them there. Yeah. But like also is someone pinned there because she's been your best friend since you were in elementary school and like she doesn't really make you feel that good or expand your thinking.
Right.
But she's there because you think that she should be. Yeah. So that's one component of this, but also like, you know, you and I developing a relationship, it's like we share very similar thinking on a lot of things. And so like Michelle's like, hey, do you want to come spin class riding? I'm like, yeah, because even just being in the energy and the vibrational frequency of people who are doing the things that you want to do, thinking the way that you want to do, calling you out on your bullshit in the ways that you need it to. How much has that changed your life? How important is that to you? What do you have to say around community?
It's been everything. I mean, that's when I decided, I actually just created a reel on this the other day, but I had a distinct moment where I looked around and I realized that I was not inspired by any of my friends. And I was like the most successful out of everyone I knew. And that made me feel good.
Right. And there's like a component of that too, right? Feeding your ego.
Totally.
Right.
And then I realized I'm always helping other people, but I don't have anyone to ask questions to. And I realized how lonely that felt. And I was like, wow, okay. And I also recognized that the thing that was keeping me from hanging out with people in different classes or what felt like outside of where I was comfortable was that it was uncomfortable.
Right.
I didn't feel like I could banter with them on the same wavelength. I didn't know half of the things that they were talking about. And I didn't realize that that's exactly where I should be.
Right.
Yeah. And that's exactly where you should be if you're in this position listening. It's like find those groups that just scare you a little bit.
Enough.
You know, they just intimidate you enough. They're like 5 steps ahead of where you currently are.
Yeah.
And then just be in the energy. I like to think of how can you be attractive? How can you magnetize them? Like, what are things that you can add value? What are problems that they're searching, you know, like searching for the solutions for? I find ways of creating experiences that are fun, but also respectful of time.
Yeah.
You know, it's like get in, get out. I love stacking 2 things at the same time. Like I love working out and also deepening relationships at the same time. So you can always find ways of coming alongside someone but you need to know what are the things that they're interested in.
Yeah.
And how can you help them solve a problem that they might be looking to solve?
Yeah. This last 3, 4, 5 months of my life, like you'll understand this. So for those of you women that are listening to this that are asking like, where do I start? I had a really beautiful moment where I asked myself, like, what am I calling in? This next season of my life, what am I calling in? Yeah. And right now, in this current moment, sitting here in front of you, the 22nd, my magic number, is the CEO mindset, right? Yeah. The last season, which I feel like I'm in a really good place now, and you're still echoing on top of that, was I wanted strong female relationships. I have a partner. I'm good in that category. I want some strong female relationships in my life. And so I had to ask myself, well, what does that look like? Yeah. What is a strong female, right? And who are the women who I feel like inspire me? I can give to, but they can give to me. So it's like a give and take kind of relationship, right? Because one of the things that you just touched on that I think is really important to understand and maybe ask yourself is there doesn't need to be that goodbye, and we don't need to get in a whole conversation of boundaries, but there doesn't need to be like a goodbye to those old relationships.
No.
But it was a moment where I kind of like asked myself, what am I getting from these relationships? Right? Am I constantly pouring? Am I constantly pouring? Am I constantly pouring? And then when I started to step into like, I want to call in some women who like have strong boundaries.
Yeah.
I want to call in some women who like are building wealth. I want to call in some women that I can sit and talk business with for 3 hours and they're like, fuck yeah. Right.
Yes.
So what am I calling in? So, I mean, I'm curious, like when you were cultivating being a small fish in a big pond, where do you start? Where does the woman who's listening to this, where does she start to curate a stronger community of women around her?
Yeah. I mean, I love what you just said there, which is like you knew what you were looking for. I believe everything starts with intention. Everything starts with intention, and to know what is going to move you forward in your life. What are you really wanting, right? Like, you talked about the relationship and you called in the relationship, and then you called in the friendships with females, and then you called in,
Yeah.
And so understanding where those biggest gaps are between you and living that fulfilled life, and then plugging those first.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we can get so tunnel vision on just making more money, making more money, making more money. But really what we need to do is work on the relationship with ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's going to actually open up the ability to then create deeper relationships with other people. And when you create deeper relationships with other people, then doors start opening, and then you start making money and doing partnerships, and all of these things come to a flow state. But first you got to bring it back to yourself.
Right.
Ooh. I think that's really the first place that I recommend going, is to the self.
Yeah.
What is your relationship? What is your friendship
with yourself?
To yourself.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I like that you talk about the relationship with money too, which, I mean, I wish we had a million more hours here to sit and talk about. So a couple of things. You had mentioned to me universal laws and these kind of like laws that you've created. Would love to talk about that. We've got maybe a few more minutes here. So would love to talk about that. And then how everyone can get a hold of you and Richer Every Day, all of the beautiful things that you and your husband are doing. You also have your container exclusively for women.
Yes. Always abundant.
Always abundant. Beautifully. Okay. So let's talk about the universal laws of abundance.
Yes. Okay. So this is what I'm really excited about, is like these wealthy woman codes, like these universal laws and principles that I've seen just carry over from all these different contexts. And you actually touched on one earlier when you said, I want to find people that I can give and like receive. And so you're actually touching on the law of reciprocity. So there is this universal law of reciprocity, and it is about giving. And I think about, if you really want to make money, money is an exchange of value. And so you have to give enough value into the world that the only way for the universe to bring balance back is to give you that value back. And so that's when you set goals, state it that way. I want to help 1,000 people to, solve this problem. I want to help heal this for this many people, versus I want to receive this. Well, great. Now you're going to sit around and wait for other people to give it to you, right? You've got to ask, and you've got to use that universal law of like, how can I create unbalance? How can I give so much value that then nature will rebalance on its own?
Amazing. Give us one other. Your other
there
favorite.
There is, yes, diminishing return.
Okay.
So, diminishing return, compounding interest. So diminishing return is, I get super excited about this kind of stuff. Diminishing return. More is not always more. When we know this, so humans are always going to want more, but there is actually a sweet spot. There's a sweet spot of where we get, like, imagine there's 100 joy points, and you go out to dinner, and you go out to dinner twice a week, and those nights are really fulfilling. You make sure you have time with your friends, you're present, you're enjoying the moment, but you go out 5 times a week, and it's just dinner. You're just eating, so your joy points really diminish the more that you do something.
Okay.
It's kind of like shopping. It's kind of like getting a nicer car. The more you do it, the less joy you actually get from it.
Okay.
And what people will typically do is they'll just look for a bigger hit. They'll just look for a bigger, nicer car, a bigger, nicer house. But when you really understand that you actually get more joy from doing something less, you can kind of find your own sweet spot.
Beautiful.
And that's what I do, is I like finding like, oh, actually, if I just buy more, it's actually not going to give me that satisfaction. But let me do this. Let me take that money that I would have spent. let me plug that into a compounding interest calculator and see what that would grow in 10 years and then buy something with that.
I love this.
So that's like the mental exercises I like to think about when I think about specifically diminishing return and how we can use that with our finances. I think understanding that mindset of knowing that we don't get more joy from actually just spending more, it allows us to save. And then when we put that into an impound calculator, then we can really see how much more that will grow for our future selves.
Which is super exciting.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today. I know this was like literally the tip of the iceberg of what you do and the work that you do. So for those that are listening, and maybe we bring you back for part 2, we can dive into more of like the juicy, like nerdy side of this that I know you geek out on. For those that are interested though, Richer Every Day, how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to reach out?
It's Michelle A. Dillard on Instagram, and then richereveryday.com and alwaysabundant.com is coming out for the women group.
Amazing. And when can we expect things with Always Abundant?
With Always Abundant, the end of June.
Okay. I will be there. For sure. Amazing. One big takeaway for the woman that is listening right now who was absorbing this conversation, you know, you've really struck some chords for her. She's realizing that there's some work to do here. What is one thing that you would like for her to take away from this conversation?
The biggest way to create wealth is to spend less than what you make. Tip the value scale by making sure you're delivering value so that money will come back to you. And, you know, use the law of given, you shall receive. And then make sure that you, as you start creating more and more wealth, that you don't fall victim to the trap of buying all the things. You know, see if there are ways to put that money into something that you can then create passive income and then use that passive income to buy the things.
I can help with that.
Yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here today. Maybe we do a part 2 because I know that felt like there was a lot still left on the table. I'm so grateful that you were able to share your knowledge and your wealth, like what I did there, with us. And thank you so much.